and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. It's Gridiron 360. I'm Bill. I got Dave with me.
How you doing?
Lots of good stuff for Dave today that we'll talk about. Yes.
I don't know about good,
Mr.
but stuff.
Florida State by the bait. We are going to do a little college football week 10. Can you believe it's week 10? Week 10 recap. We missed you on the preview for week 10, but that's okay because a lot of the top teams, undefeated teams on the bye this past week, Alabama on the bye, LSU on the bye, both of them, going head-to-head this weekend. The big one. This is a big one. We also have Penn State on a bye, Ohio State on a bye, Minnesota on a bye, lots of bye. Bye.
Yes, sir. We got 9 teams heading into week 10 that were zeros in the loss column. Not anymore, my friends. We are down to lucky number 7.
That's right. The App State team will. Why don't we start with that? I know it's at the end, but it was Thursday night football. App State gets Georgia Southern coming to town, and App State on a great little tear, undefeated right now. They went into that, ranked 23, 24, something like that.
I think it was 21.
21! Going into the game 7-0, while Georgia Southern goes in at 4-3. Don't want to sit on it too long, but unfortunately App State is one of those teams that is no longer unbeaten. They lose to Georgia Southern on Thursday night, 24-21. Quarterback Zach Thomas for App State was 25 for 51. Not super efficient. Did have 3 TDs and no picks, 271 yards. On the flip side, wow, I can't even tell you what was going on there. But I can tell you that Wesley Kennedy III, number 12, their running back, went 13 carries for $145 and 2 TDs, while Shea Wertz, who I believe is the quarterback, number 1, because his yardage was one completion out of 4 attempts for 16 yards. No TDs, no picks. He was 13 of 83 on the ground for a TD. Georgia Southern runs that triple option, so the fact that they only have 4 passing attempts isn't very surprising because it's run, and more run, even if it's third down and long. Those teams typically are still running, as we saw with Wofford that came into Death Valley and took on my Tigers. They, too, run that type of offense. So not a whole lot to talk about. It's been a nice story for Appalachian State. One of the things I've said is the new head coach there is very fortunate to have a program in place with some really good players that was left by Scott Satterfield and his staff that have gone to Louisville. I think that Appalachian State's a great story. But, again, this new coach did benefit from the previous regime's leaving great stuff there. And, so I guess the real story with App State moving forward is can they continue year after year on this nice little progression they have and, make some noise against some big teams like they did years ago against Michigan? We'll have to see.
Yeah, just really what it comes down to is Georgia Southern historically puts together a good football team. Always been a team that gives teams a lot of grief. They've beaten some Power 5 schools over the last 5-6 years. Not your upper echelon, but still. And they'll play anybody anywhere. They're usually a team that makes their hay playing a big team and getting that $1 million payout sort of thing. But here's the thing.
Worth it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing is what it comes down to. I said it about Georgia Tech in the past, who's the most probably prominent school in running the triple option. But you also have other teams. A lot of the service academies will run that kind of offense. Here's the thing. You got to be sound in your gaps. You can't lose your eye focus on these teams. You got to tackle well. They will grind out the clock on you. They will take passing offenses and kind of render them useless in doing that because they play discipline. And if you don't play disciplined defense, they have an opportunity to beat you. And here's just an example of an App State team that struggled to do that in the game. Even though they did go to the air quite a bit, their quarterback was, inefficient at 25 of 51. Did have 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, again, it wasn't a total lost cause. But, again, it comes back to that defense and them being able to grind out plays on the ground. Georgia Southern controlled the clock in this game. And, again, didn't pass, but went 335 on the ground, and that's the worst. You get over 250 against one of these teams in yardage, one of these triple option teams in rushing, and you're in trouble. And they were in this game. It wasn't a turnover. You're not going to get sacks against them because they don't throw the ball. So the key is, can they stay ahead of the chains? And they did in this game. And so App State falls from the ranks of the unbeaten. Still a good story, but just a story.
Yep. We will move on again, just to run it down again. Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, Penn State, Minnesota, all undefeated, all on byes this week. We got some big clashes in our preview we'll talk about later in the week. So let's jump to my team, the Clemson Tigers. Well, they had the Wofford Terriers.
They had a bye too. Let's be honest.
It's a little tune-up. But again, Wofford. To their credit, they were 5-2 going into this game, so they weren't a losing team, even though they were not a big task for us. But they too run the triple option, and we just took it to them, bro. We took it to them right out the gates. It was a Travis Etienne type of day. Guy had 200 yards in the first half and a couple of TDs. 9 for 212 and 2 TDs. He barely saw the field after that. Once again, the Tigers, the final score 59-14. Yeah, Wofford put 14 on us, but go ahead and pull this game up and look at the statisticals.
I mean, let's
played everybody under the sun. One guy I do want to give a shout out to. I think he's our third string, might be working his way up to second string inside linebacker, number 15 and defensive coordinator's son, Jake Venables. It's got to be kind of tough for both of them, having your dad be that, but maybe more so for Brent, having his son being out there and being as high profile as he is. Jake was like a 3-star coming out of high school, and he's a good player. He's seen the field several times this year because we play a lot of players, and he's done well. This was a little bit of a coming out party for Jake Venables. I see a bright future at inside linebacker for the Tigers. He will start for us one day. Phenomenal game for Venables. He came in and just, when he was in there, he was all, again, this is triple option. You said it, discipline. And he was great. He was really great. I was very impressed. And mind you, again, that was, I have to say that because we, the first stringers are going to do their thing. But that was really kind of something that impressed me a lot. I like what I saw at him. Everybody had a good day. Everybody. Trevor, 12 for 16, 218, 3 TDs, no picks, very sharp. I can't say much else other than the fact that, with the triple option offense, I think they had maybe under 100 yards rushing, at least the first half. I know for sure. I'm looking. Yeah, it looks like they just went over 100, but a lot of that was in the second half when we had the backups in. It was a good game for our boys.
To do this, you got to explain this one to me. First of all, Trevor Lawrence, terrible quarterback. I mean, only threw the ball for 218. Awful performance. ESPN, get out your pitchforks and torches. Guy doesn't belong on the field. I mean, this team is just humming. I dare you to want to play them. I dare you to want to play them. All the ridiculousness we're hearing. We're not going to, we're going to have to bounce undefeated. Get the hell out of here. This team is destroying people. The only problem I really, really have with Clemson right now is you got a guy on your team. I mean, WTF. How the hell do you say this name? Who is this D tackle you got? A horror? I don't even know how to say this name. What is up
I
with
think
this?
he's a walk-on.
I don't know what it is. It's
Or Horo. To be honest with you, I don't even know who he is.
I got
6'4", 284. I mean,
Yep.
he's a big boy.
D-tackle. What the hell? But anyway, yeah,
He's got to be a weak side defensive end. Yeah, he might be a walk-on. This is not one of our higher slotted guys at D-tackle because we're very deep there. But again, that's what I love about it. Everybody played. We've played like 80 guys a week.
Well, the problem is I can't even scroll down to the bottom of all your players. There's so many of them. But anyway,
I love that.
look, you could say all you want about Wofford and all this. Like Clemson just. I said this to you offline here, and I know he won't get it, but Dabo and the job he's doing coaching right now, he needs to be this team's biggest nemesis to keep them hungry. Nobody will ever understand how challenging it is without having gone through it to repeat as a defending champion. And I mean, this is a team that, let's be honest, what have you guys played? 3 straight championships? Is that what you've been in?
No, we've played 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4. Sorry, 3 out of 4. So that's pretty tough to do, but
4 straight
playoff
appearances.
So, to motivate this team at the right moments in the right way and to get this out of him, I mean, he was getting on ETN a little bit, and I mean, this is one of their 2 best players in my mind, maybe 3 if you take the linebacker Isaiah Simmons and Trevor Lawrence. And I mean 9 for 212, and watch his runs, and while he got great spacing, he literally is just running by people. Nobody could even touch him in this game.
Good vision, great patience. He's not afraid of contact. He likes to truck people, but when he gets that space, he hits that gear. He definitely has another gear that he'll hit.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I have known this Clemson team since you and I have been friends. We're talking what? We're around
1999.
Almost 20 years here, right on 20 years.
2018. And back then it was the other way around.
But I've seen
Florida State.
I've seen some running backs there. I mean, CJ Spiller gets a lot of press as a former running back. I'll be honest with you. I love James Davis. I thought James Davis was a phenomenal running back.
And as a matter of fact, to that point, Travis Etienne sets the all-time school rushing record for touchdowns this weekend, breaking James Davis's record.
Let me just say this. I'll say
Do we need to go back to Ray Priester, baby?
Etienne is Etienne, in my mind, is the best Clemson running back they've ever had since I've watched them, and it's not even close. And, you can say a lot of different things. You can talk, it's about statistics. It's about the way this kid runs. He's special on a lot of levels. We talk about the Jonathan Taylors, the J.K. Dobbins. Clemson's got a lot of negative press this year for an undefeated team. And I just watched this kid play. And in games, you've mentioned it, where Trevor Lawrence couldn't quite get going early on in the game, that we're used to. And now let's just say this. We're comparing Trevor Lawrence to one of the best championship game performances I've ever seen out of anyone. So he's got an unfair comparison. And, I mean, the guy is just unbelievable. I want to see, when it comes down to it, I'd love this guy to slip and fall into the second round next year so my Bears could go get him. I don't think it'll happen. I think NFL scouts will see something in this guy that's just special.
I don't know if he'll come out next year, as much as that sounds. I mean,
that's crazy.
We'll
that's crazy.
I know it is, but if he doesn't have his degree, which he should, because Deshaun and all of our guys, 3.5 years will get a degree. But if he doesn't have his degree, he will stay.
I guess I just, and this is not, I'm far from Homer with Clemson. And I know they're ACC, and I'm an ACC guy, but I'm not an SEC. I'm not going to chant my conference in the middle of a game. I ain't that guy. But I just have to acknowledge what I'm seeing here in order to be legitimate. And I think this kid is special. I think he is right up there with every back in the country right now.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right now. I think he's been that way.
Yeah. I think he's going to be, with the way the NFL game's going, because he could catch the ball really well, too. I mean, let's see. He had 1 reception, but it was a 23-yarder. Now, again, it's Wofford, but he does that too all the time when they want to get it to him. So he'll be a good NFL back. I guess, if I'm not going to try to poke hole. Oh, here's another thing I do want to mention. The freshman receiver, Joseph Ngata, he's our kick returner. 3 returns for 57 yards, a 19-yard average. He's been doing that a lot this year. He's impressive. He's not afraid to bring it out from the end zone as long as it's not too deep. But if we're going to put a chink in our armor, and you may know where I'm going with this because it's just killing us. And he had I think probably the best game of his career in the title game. So maybe he's holding on because I've seen him regress back to what he did, most of the year last year, this year. And that's our punter, Will Spires. 2 punts for a total of 70 yards, 35-yard average. Not going to get it done, man.
Truthfully,
most of the time, it's really and look. When we get down to the wire, flipping that field, and Coach talks about it, is very, very, very important. It's the little things.
Yeah.
It's the little things.
Yeah, championships are won by very small margins. They really are. Even the Clemson-Alabama game, that Clemson just manhandled Alabama, it was the little things that mattered. I guess I'm happy to say that I think Florida State has an edge on you there. Of course, our punter gets a hell of a lot more practice than your guy does.
I hear you.
And he's a walk-on, too. How you feel about that? How you feel about getting ousted by a Florida State walk-on punter? Because our other punter can't stop from DUIing.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So, we take this one 59-14. We're 9-0. Wofford has 5-3 record, but if you listen to the cast, they have everything in front of them in their division, and this was a good test for them. I mean, you come off this, you should be able to, it doesn't matter what the score was. They put up a fight until the end, so good for them. They didn't pull their starters till late in the game, so they let them kind of fight it out, and then decided the smart thing. Look, we still have a lot in front of us where we are in our conference and our division. Let's not get any of our guys hurt that could help us continue on our run. So we only have one more home game this season due to the Tigers. Next week we will travel to NC State, who absolutely got demolished by Wake Forest. I don't think that's on our list, but let me tell you something. Wake Forest, one, they're a good team. The Newman kid came back. But to Dave Dorn, the head coach of NC State, he could be gone. He had his shot. You look across the NFL, and it's riddled with especially defensive linemen, but also some receivers that have come out of NC State. Ryan Finley gets the start next week for Cincinnati. Yep. He was their quarterback last year. They've had players. They've had their shot. They had their shot at us. And, unfortunately, it's almost like that missed field goal against us 3 years ago that would have taken us down was they missed that field. I thought we had lost. They missed that chipper. We end up winning the game, and ever since then, they just haven't been right almost. But Dave Dorn, I don't like him. I like the NC State program. I just don't like the attitude of the guy. He's very, very negative towards my program, and that's probably why I have a bias. But I like the way we run our program, and I think a lot of people do. So screw you, Dave Dorn.
I think it's a matter of a guy trying to create a little bit of drama where the team can't really create the drama on the field for him. You can look. Listen again. I go back to I want to hate Clemson as much as anybody else, but truthfully, their coach, their team, the way they play, the way they win, they don't really give you a hell of a lot of reasons. So I got to be honest with you. I think that guy's just poking the bear, and I think the bear's going to bite his head off this weekend.
It could be bad for them because they got waxed 44-10, and I just want to pull it up right quick because I was listening to that game. Yep, just what I thought. It was 21-0 first quarter, 34-10 at half. I mean, this game was done. That was the only points they scored, NC State, and they didn't score again. They had some guy, Devin Leary, come in. I think he's a freshman, but he was not the starter at quarterback for NC State. 17-45, $149, 1 TD, 2 picks. Yeah, it sucks.
Yep. So Clemson's going to, let's just say this. Clemson, barring something insane, should walk into the title game undefeated.
We'll get NC State on the road. Then we get Wake at home. That's our last home game.
Which is that's a good tune-up.
That's a good tune-up. They're a good team. Sage Surratt, We've talked about him all year. That guy's an NFL prospect. The Newman kid, still a little banged up with the shoulder, but played. If he plays, it'll make it much harder. But either which way,
Where's that game at?
It's in Death Valley, and
that's
it's the last home game of the season. So though we have a very young roster, for any of the seniors left on the roster, they're going to be flying high for that game.
Yep.
And then we'll go to South Carolina at the end of the year, and they didn't have such a great weekend either.
Yep.
So let's move on.
Let's do our. This is another one of those teams that had a battle in front of them, which was Southern Methodist heading to Memphis. If you didn't see, game day was there. Pretty cool little town, certainly at least where they were at. We had the King, Jerry Lawler, there doing some guest picks, which was kind of fun. SMU, if you don't know, obviously they're undefeated, but they've got a transfer quarterback from Texas in Shane Buechele.
Who's been balling out of his mind this year.
Yeah, been having a very good year. Now, Memphis coming off a loss to, gosh, I'm blanking now. Do we remember who they lost to? Anyway, so Memphis
came last week.
I think they won last week, but they lost the week before.
Against Tulsa. Yeah, they won last week against Tulsa. They won the week before against Tulane. They lost the week before that to Temple.
Right.
28. And that's their only loss of the year, I believe.
Now, outside the Power 5,
they beat Ole Miss at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think just the eye test told me that Memphis was probably the best non-Power 5 team out there in the country. This is a team every year, and Norwell, their coach, is very good with this. They have speed in a lot of areas, and they actually, especially offensively, which is kind of interesting, play very physical. So
they'll hit you in the mouth.
This was a tough road test. You can ask those teams from Mississippi when they go play Memphis. You play Memphis out of conference, and you better play because they can usually bring a good team out there. And they came out and they played with the lead for a good portion of the game, and SMU was chasing, but chasing well.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just Memphis team. The speed on this team is just to me is another level for a group of 5 type school. Very, very reminiscent of some of probably the middling Power 5 teams in most conferences. And they came out and they beat them. And this is a good team. Again, physical. We saw the run from the receiver, Gibson.
No, the receiver was Coxey.
Coxey, was that the one with the
Number
power?
10, DeMonte Coxey.
No, who was 14?
14 is their running back.
Oh, that is their running back. So it was a running
Gibson.
back run. Gibson, he had a monster run in the game, too.
And he's not even, I don't know what's going on. I mean, like, Kenneth Gant, number 19, was the one that led the backfield in rushes with 21 attempts for 88 yards and a TD. But Gibson had 3 attempts, 97 yards, a 32.3 yard average, and a TD. Then on top of that, Gibson goes 6 for $130 receiving and a TD. And then on top of that, the other guy, number 10, DeMonte Coxey, 7 for $143 and 2 TDs. So they were all over him. The quarterback for Memphis, Brady White, number 3, went 19 of 33, 350 yards, 3 TDs, no picks. They were hitting him on the ground. They were hitting him through the air. And really, SMU couldn't stop it. It was a good day from Shane Buechele, man.
Yep,
I mean, the guy balled out of his mind, did everything he could. 54 attempts, 34 completions, 456 air yards, 3 TDs, no picks. They really didn't get much going on the ground, though. Their lead back, Xavier Jones, number 5, had 11 carries for 22 yards, did score. And then the next guy in line, Freeman, number 2, had 6 carries, 74 yards, 2 TDs, but it was a high scoring game, man. I mean, at the end of the day, it was 54-48. So, SMU puts 24 points up in the fourth quarter to Memphis's 14, but it was just a case of too little, too late, really. And, they just, Memphis ran them out the building right out the gate. They were ready, game day. Everybody was pumped. And, they took it to them. I still give SMU and Sonny Dykes a lot of credit. I mean, they've had a phenomenal season, and they've still got a lot in front of them. Unfortunately, they need Memphis to take another loss because they're both 8-1, and Memphis has the head-to-head with them. But, Memphis will play Houston on the road this week. Then they have South Florida, who's, Charlie Strong. Oh. And then they have Cincinnati at the end of the year, who's a really good team.
Yep.
And in terms of SMU, they'll get to go home. They get East Carolina. Then they get Navy on the road, who's you got to be, again, they're a team that they'll run that triple option. You better be sound, gap responsibility, be disciplined with your defense. And then at the end of the year, they have Tulane, who beat Memphis.
Yep.
Or no, they didn't beat Memphis. That was Temple, the other T. But they gave them a game. And I think Tulane actually beat, somebody good or at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, so it'll, again, we've got, there's still a lot to be played there. Again, I still think Memphis is probably the best non-Power 5 team that I've seen so far this year. What we'll get into next is another undefeated, and the only other undefeated team that played remaining is West Virginia traveled to undefeated Baylor.
That was a Friday nighter.
Friday night, yep. It was
it was Thursday.
Thursday. It was a close game, closer. Baylor's not doing themselves favors right now in the sense of how they're winning, and certainly their schedule gets pretty tough now.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they've got K-State next. They still have.
They have. They'll go to TCU next week.
TCU. Sorry,
I
knew it was a purple team.
Crosstown rival.
Yeah.
And then they get the Sooners at their house. Then they get Texas at their house, and then they go to Kansas. So the Oklahoma Texas gauntlet, at least they get them in Waco at Baylor.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this is a team that realistically could have 3 losses by the end of the season. The eye test says, you got to give them a lot of credit for what they're doing. The eye test says that's going to be a tough road to get undefeated in. A loss in the Big 12 right now is playoff canceling. I think the Big 12 has just had too many hits. West Virginia is, I think, 3-5 overall, 1-4 in the conference. They're second to last in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't the look you wanted to see out of Baylor, but nonetheless, they are undefeated. They control their destiny. And just something to talk about overall. We talked about all these teams that have a bye. Right now, we're down to 7 undefeated teams. There cannot be, at this point, any more than 4 undefeated teams in college football to end the season.
Yeah.
You've got Alabama, LSU playing this week. Someone's gonna take a loss there. You've got Minnesota, Penn State playing this week, which is gonna take a loss. And the fact is that Minnesota and or Penn State, actually both teams, if Minnesota wins, they'll have to play Ohio State in a title game. So that'll put another undefeated team down to 1 loss at a minimum. And then if Penn State wins, Penn State has to play Ohio State in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So you got those games. So right now, you're going to see the potential of an undefeated team coming out of the SEC in Alabama or LSU. Again, not guarantees, but this is best case scenario.
Penn State, Minnesota is this weekend now.
Right. So you're going to see Ohio State, Penn State, or Minnesota. Only one of those teams can walk out of this schedule undefeated. Clemson can still walk out undefeated, and then you've got Baylor, who could potentially be undefeated. Those are your only possibilities. And again, as we talked about, Baylor has got a rough road ahead, and all those teams have title games, with really only Clemson having a pretty likely softer opponent, comparatively speaking, to the other teams.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, this is where the reality of the fact that we're talking about a 1-loss team getting into this playoffs is a high likelihood at this point. So now what we'll do is we'll move into...
Well, before we do, I do want to say something on this. Matt Rule, again, love what he's doing at Baylor. Charlie Brewer, number 12, the quarterback for Baylor. 20 for 26 this game, very efficient, 277 yards, 2 TDs, no picks. Their running back, JaMychal Hasty, number 6, was 14 for 77 on the ground. The fact of the matter is this. Let me run through some of the scores Baylor's had recently, okay? Or not even recently. I'm going to take us back a little bit. Baylor, the 4th game of the year, had Iowa State, who is a very highly touted team. Matt Campbell, great coach. They win that game 23-21. Okay? That's a fast team. That's a team that can quickly score on you typically, yet it was a pretty modest score. Then the following week, they go to Kansas State, and this is before Kansas State had to take on Oklahoma where they won, and Baylor wins 31-12. The next week, Baylor is at home against Texas Tech, a little more of a high-powered offense, a team that's typically known to score points, and Baylor wins that game 33-30. The next week, they go to Okie State, again, a team with a winning record, good coaching Gundy, one of the best running backs, if not the best, in Chuba Hubbard, and a pretty good passer at the quarterback position. Again, Oklahoma State, a team known to put points on the board. Baylor wins 45-27. This week, West Virginia, not as high potent of an offense, lower scoring. Baylor wins 17-14. So I guess where I'm going at, you don't want to play to the level of your competition. You want to play your game. But if you're gonna, they seem to be able to grind them out whichever way they're going to get it from whichever opponent they're going to get. If it's a high-powered team, they step up to the challenge, and their offense is able to get going. If it's not a high-powered offense, they grind you out. Their defense is good, and they win by however many they need to win by. So it's kind of interesting, and, good for them. I hope they are able to get a win this week at TCU so that they can go into that Oklahoma-Baylor game and it be a lot of fun. Now, Oklahoma needs Baylor to keep winning too if they have any shot of maybe backdooring into this thing. Because if Baylor does slip up against TCU, that's going to really, really not make the matchup between Baylor and Oklahoma as important.
Flat out, Oklahoma has to have Baylor win all their games except for their game.
Yep.
It has to.
Yeah.
And I think, realistically, you're right. A win is a win is a win, and all else fails. You'll hear me say this argument. Any idiot that wants to come out there, and yes, you are an idiot if you want to argue an undefeated Clemson team not playing in the game. That's the name out there right now that's getting the least amount of love of the undefeated teams.
That's fine.
If you want to argue that point, I'm sorry, just a win is a win. You go undefeated. If they win out the Big 12, they're in. They're in. In my mind, I think the Big 12 is a weak conference. I think the ACC is equivalent, maybe weaker, only in the sense that there isn't that. It's the tier below Clemson that's been a little poor this year. Overall, though, I would say they're deeper from a talent standpoint, but it's that ability to fight the top dog. So I agree with you. A win is a win. I think. While I will say this, I don't think Oklahoma has a chance at the title as it appears right now, unless some serious chaos ensues. That's kind of where I'm at. But I don't want to be down on them, but I do think a loss is for Baylor outside of the Oklahoma game kills the whole conference.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
I would say I still don't believe that conference gets into I don't think the Big 12 gets into the playoff if things play out reasonably close to where they stand right now.
Yeah,
that's just my belief.
A lot of that's going to have to do, honestly, at this point with the Pac-12 and the SEC. That's what's going to decide it.
Yep. Yeah.
Pac-12 and the SEC, I think, are going to decide if Oklahoma has the opportunity to backdoor the way in. So.
Sure.
All right, let's go on to some other games.
All right, so now where we're coming from with these games is for a few different reasons, but basically because now I think we're both, I don't know, would you agree? I think there's a very high likelihood we're going to have a one-loss team in the playoff based off the way the schedules are right now.
Absolutely. So, I don't see any way how you can't.
Yeah.
I don't see any way how you can, only because Alabama, LSU's this weekend, Penn State, Minnesota's this weekend. Minnesota and Penn State both have to take on Ohio State. Well, at least if Minnesota makes it to the champion, they have Wisconsin, I think, still. So.
Yeah, there's a gauntlet left for all the upper echelon teams right now. I mean, everybody in the all the players in the SEC.
The only way that can happen,
Baylor has to win out.
Baylor wins out.
Yep. Yeah, but it also takes
Us winning out,
the
Baylor wins
SEC
out,
running the gauntlet,
Alabama or LSU,
a Big
wins
Ten
out,
running the gauntlet,
Penn
one team.
State, Minnesota, or Ohio State winner.
Right. So it would take a huge thing. We could be dealing with two one-loss teams easily in this scenario. So what we get down to next is we want to talk about some teams that are in it. This one's probably more important for the LSU Alabama side of things. Whereas their win-loss record probably puts them on the outside looking in, but Ole Miss heading to number 11 Auburn in this game. Ole Miss not particularly strong team, but Auburn.
Again, I just said they lost their opener at the beginning of the year to Memphis.
Yeah, but this is an Auburn team that, while they've got 2 losses, has played some good football this year.
Mm-hmm.
So
probably the best 2-loss team in the country.
Yeah, I'd go with that. I definitely would. So you're talking a game that kind of played out as I'd expect it to play out.
Really? I didn't, because it was much closer than I expected.
Yeah,
You're
I guess
talking,
that's true.
Okay, the final score, Auburn wins this game 20-14. First quarter, nobody scores. Second quarter. And listen,
I guess played out in the win-loss
column there. Nick's had a great day, 30-44, 340 yards, no TDs, no picks. He did have 8 carries for 20 yards and a TD. But, to not score on Ole Miss, who's not very good defensively in the first quarter, didn't do this young man any favors. It's just kind of continuing to carry the narrative that, unfortunately, and I think he'll be good over time, but unfortunately, this is the downfall of what I thought at the beginning of the year, especially as the first quarter to third of the year, was the team that had the makeup to win the whole thing because of their defensive front, just like my Clemson Tigers last year. They have the best D-line, possibly the best front between their line and linebackers in the country, and what's held them back in winning some of these games that they've been competitive in, unfortunately, has been freshman quarterback Bo Nix. Against a team like Ole Miss, you need to come out and get yourself rolling. And 0-0 at the end of the first quarter. Now, halftime, they were able to get a touchdown and field goal, but Ole Miss matches them with a touchdown. Not matches, but gets a touchdown. It's 10-7. Auburn took over in the second half, but I expected them to beat Ole Miss down.
Yeah, now
they
I will say the score was not indicative of the way the game was played. What was scary for Auburn was their inability to score in the red zone
after losing to LSU in Death Valley 23-20. You need to come out and be pissed, have a little chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Okay, especially because next week they get Georgia coming to town.
Yeah,
and we will talk about them in a little bit.
But hold on. But let me just say this though, they didn't finish in the red zone. Nix was 30 of 44 for 40 yards, 50 yards, something like that, 340 yards. They doubled them over in overall possession. The problem they had is they had to settle for field goals, and when they did, their kicker sucked. He was 2 of 5 in this game.
That's not something you see at Auburn, first of all. They usually have some of the best kickers in the league. Most of them are in the NFL.
Yeah.
And who's their kicker? Anders Carlson. He's usually pretty money.
Right, but I will say this too. So that was a killer. They didn't get a whole hell of a lot of pressure. Their running game, they stuck with it, but it wasn't spectacular. It definitely didn't look like what we saw against LSU. They did all right, but their yards per carry was a little bit light. They dominated the time of possession, 36-23. I agree with you. The score, to me, the score didn't indicate who controlled this game, but I get what you're saying. You got to come out and you got to finish, and they didn't finish in the areas they should have finished. And so that is a little bit of a cause for concern. But I think Auburn handled this game more so than the score indicates.
Yeah, for Ole Miss, I don't know where they go from here. The Plumlee kid started again, but he went 11 for 21, 86 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. He also rushed the ball 17 times for 92 yards and a touchdown.
Yep.
But Then, Matt Corral saw the field, 3 completions off of 6 attempts, 13 yards, no TDs, no picks. He ran it 3 times for 20 yards. But they've been back and forth between these 2 quarterbacks all season. So
Yep.
I'm just trying to think, figure it out, man. I mean, if you're not very good, then maybe you're not very good, but ride with somebody. It seems like they're riding with Plumlee, but then we'll see like a game next week or something where maybe Corral will get more time. I just don't know who their quarterback, like their true number 1 quarterback is, and quite frankly, I don't know if they do either, and that's my problem.
Well, the problem is that their quarterbacks are not playing very strong in the quarterback role, but worse is both these guys are leading the teams as running backs, and
Yeah.
that is a real problem.
Listen, man. Number 9, Jerrion Ely, that was the kid that was committed to them, then decommitted, and then on National Signing Day, recommitted, locked it down with Ole Miss. He was a guy that, as a Clemson Tiger, I was like, if you watched him in the All-American game last year, he was just juking left and right,
Yep.
in between the tackles, very, very shifty. I don't want to give him a comp to Reggie Bush, but that's what it reminds me of.
Yep.
That shiftiness between the tackles. So, I expect big things from him in the future, but you're right. The fact that he's not the leading rusher, that it's the quarterback, something's not right there.
Yeah, now let me just I will say this in Auburn's defense. They have played enough tough teams and played enough good games for me to know that they're a good team. Okay. While I don't like the way this game played out on the scoreboard for Auburn, they've shown me enough, and the fact is they dominated this game. Now, they got to get some things right, but this is a team that I think can create hell for Alabama at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Create hell next week.
Yeah. So, could create hell for Georgia. So, again, I'm going to kind of take this a little bit with a grain of salt. And again, I wouldn't if I watched this team play and I was like, oh, man, like they lost to Oregon and then they got hammered by LSU. But they didn't. I mean, they played all those games
LSU
tough.
and Oregon, they lost by a combined.
Well, they didn't lose to Oregon. They beat Oregon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Let's see. Who they lose? They lost to Florida. Yeah, Florida was the big loss. That was the biggest deficit, 24-13. LSU 23-20. I mean, they're a good team. I don't know what's going to happen with Gus Malzahn. They have a winning record, but I think they've been mired in mediocrity in the SEC West. In any other conference in the country, they'd be looking great and be in great shape, but they're in the toughest, not just the
toughest
division, and so got to get over that hump right now. With a what is it? What are they? 5-2, 6-2, 7-2, something like that.
6-2, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, you hate to say they're going to lose Malzahn, but if he doesn't beat Alabama at the end of the year, that could be it, even with the winning record, because he hasn't been able to get Alabama in a while, and that's very big for Auburn fans and alumni and boosters.
Yep, very much so. Yeah, they got to get it right. Bo Nix, again, I think the offense has to figure out how to finish next week and beyond in positive offensive territory. Their kicker's got to get his head out of his culo, and they got to go. So we'll move on to the next game. This one probably doesn't have playoff implications
Not
as much
anymore.
But I kind of want to touch on this love of all things Notre Dame. They played Virginia Tech at home. Notre Dame is a double loss team after taking a shellacking. They lost to Georgia and then took a shellacking to Michigan. Now play Virginia Tech. Kind of important, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has the best overall record in the Coastal right now for the ACC. They're not in first in the ACC Coastal. They are tied, a 3-way tie with 2 losses in the ACC. Virginia Tech goes in there and gave Notre Dame all they could handle. It took everything for Notre Dame to win this game, and we talked about this. Like a team like Notre Dame, more so than anyone, and you've mentioned it because of their lack of a title game, is going to have to win with style points. And obviously the Michigan game, I think, put the fork in them.
Oh, they're done.
But this showed, I think, kind of just to me, this is Notre Dame.
This is who they are.
So,
unfortunately.
next year when we're going and want to rank them in the top 10 again so we can have all these big, flashy matchups, this is who you got. This is who you have. Ian Book, not special. Not horrid, but not special.
No, I mean, the guy, it was all the talk about him last year, taking the job over at Notre Dame, changing the offense, but they lost some pieces into the NFL, and it has showed. He threw a ton. I mean, he went 29 of 53, 341 yards, 2 TDs, but he had 2 picks.
Yep.
He also rushed the ball 13 times for 50 yards and a TD. And he has a lot of rushing stats, especially from a touchdown perspective, which is good. That means if nothing's there and they're in the red zone, he's able to make moves and get in there. But that's not this guy's game. Not this guy's game.
It's a Notre Dame survival thing where he's at, because it's not like he augments a prolific rushing attack. Their rushing attack is really can be very poor to mediocre at best, I think.
I mean,
overall.
Look at the quarterback for Virginia Tech. The fact that this game was they matched in the first touchdowns in both the first and second quarter. They were at half tied up. The third quarter, Virginia Tech takes the lead with a field goal, 17-14. The quarterback for Virginia Tech, number 4, Quincy Patterson, the second, not junior. Okay. I never understood that.
The deuce.
He went nine completions out of 28 attempts. Not that great. Not efficient. Only 139 yards. Only 1 TD through the air and a pick. So it's not like they were dropping bombs on Notre Dame. And I really think a lot of this, as I know we want to come down on Book and so forth, but this has been, it appears to me, a little bit of the thorn in Notre Dame's side. We saw this defense, especially the defensive line, when they went between the hedges in Athens to take on Georgia, just step up, right? I mean, like, wow, where's that been? Like, was it only that game? Are you playing the level of your competition? Because that's the reason. I mean, that guy didn't light him up, Patterson. And, I'm looking at the ground game and the receiving game, nothing explosive, but they just can't seem to maintain that defense for Notre Dame.
Well, and and let me say this, though, too, is they almost doubled them up in yards, and Notre Dame they don't have athletes to finish. I've watched it all year. They don't have finishers, and Book is not a finisher. None of their running backs are finishers. There's talk about their tight end.
I like him.
He's good.
He's a big guy.
But they can't finish. They cannot finish. And then they turn the ball over on top of that. And the fact is, this was a home game.
Yeah.
And let's talk about Virginia Tech. I mean, Virginia Tech does not impress me overall. They may have only 2 losses on the season, but I watched a team with a 35-7 lead on Miami, and then had to score a last-minute touchdown.
Duke 45-10. They almost lost to Furman first game of the year. They won 24-17.
Yeah, so to me, I guess
Rhode Island 34-17.
Yeah, and they were losing in that game for a while.
Games that just like our Wofford game.
Yeah,
you should annihilate them.
Yeah, so this is, I guess I just want to, I more than anything, I want to take some of this Notre Dame luster. The shiniest thing about Notre Dame is their gold helmets. I'm kind of tired of hearing about it. And it's not that I want to just sit there and dog them, but this team, we're talking about paying players. I'm gonna go on a mini rant here, but paying players in college football, right? And how that's going to impact recruiting, regardless of what they say they're going to do with these rules. Bullshit. It is going to change recruiting. Notre Dame has had for decades a massive recruiting advantage over everyone in college football with their singular TV contract, with the high-profile name they got, and every year they choke it away. They can hire any coach they want. They've got deep pockets. They've got huge boosters. They got endowments. They got everything. They can speak about giving kids a grade A education, and they don't get it done. So, you know what? Spray paint some more gold into your helmets. You're still poo. You're poo. I'm sorry. You're poo. You're poo, you're poo. I just don't want to hear it anymore. Like, this Notre Dame team, if I see them get ranked in the top 10 again next year, I'm going to be pissed, because everything about this team, it's the same team over and over again. Everybody loves Brian Kelly, except for everybody with a brain. because they know that he's not this great, phenomenal coach. He's a good coach, but he has all these advantages and never takes advantage of them. So whatever. I'm done with them. I'm off them.
Well,
Not that I was ever on them.
Here's a little fun factoid. I grew up in the Northeast in the 80s. So, and I played football. So it was every kid's dream, usually in that region of the country or even anywhere in that
I'm from
time.
Chicago. That was the school.
You loved, Notre Dame was a place, like whether you were a good player or not, if you loved football and you wanted to play, your a dream would be to go play football at Notre Dame. So, bucket list. I've never been to South Bend, but guess what? Saturday, November 7th, 2020, baby.
You're gonna
The
go to
Tigers and the Irish start a home and home, and we are there next year. So I gotta go.
Been there, never for a game, but I have been to South Bend. I have gone to the stadium.
I want to go for a game. I'm so excited. We're going to take on the Irish in South Bend. That's going to be a great one, dude. It'll be cold. November 7th. Should be chilly.
But it'll be another Notre Dame reckoning of truth.
I mean, you're talking about, Trevor's third year. Oh, my God.
All right, so we're going to move on. I wanted to hit on that game because it's just like it's about time to end the experiment.
It is, and you mentioned it at the beginning of the discussion about this, is like right now, I guess Virginia Tech's in the driver's seat in that side potentially to be there, or if you're going to have a good team face us, or the best possible team out of the Coastal face Clemson in the championship game, you're kind of looking at Virginia Tech maybe being that team. We'll have to see. I mean, they sit right now at 5-3. They go to Georgia Tech. I'm sorry. They're home against Wake, which could be tough. If they lose that, then that could be the end of them. Then they go to Georgia Tech. Then they get Pitt, and then they get their in-state rivalry with Virginia. So they still have to hold up their end of the bargain. For Notre Dame, they get Duke coming to town this week. Then
and mind you, though, just to be clear,
they go to Duke.
They get Wake. They get Wake, which is
Virginia Tech
out of there. Yeah, they get.
Yep.
And you said they get Pitt.
Yeah, they get.
And then Virginia. Now understand, Virginia.
Well, and then they also have Georgia Tech in there.
Right. Okay. So we'll put Georgia Tech to the side. We'll give them the win. Not sure I even could guarantee that, but I'll give them the win. But understand, right now, Georgia Tech, UVA, and Pitt are the three teams in the Coastal that have 2 losses.
Georgia Tech is in there?
I mean, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, UVA, and Pitt are the 3 teams with 2 losses. So Virginia Tech's got to play 2 of those 3. So it is they've got it up to their destiny to win this side of the conference. But that's all. They got to play all the toughest teams in that conference. And you got Miami and UNC with 3 losses in conference.
They're just knocking on the door.
Yeah, knocking on the door's potential. So that's probably the cloudiest division and entrance into a title game that there is right now across all the conferences is that Coastal in the ACC. None of it really a particularly great look, but it is the one with the most opportunity for the most teams.
Yeah, well, and for Notre Dame, they've got, like I said, they've got to go to Duke. They don't get Duke. They go to Duke this weekend, and then they get Navy at home. Then they get BC at home, and they travel out west to take on Stanford. So none of those teams particularly. They're going to be favored in all those games, but I'll tell you right out the gate, don't mess with Cutcliffe. It's 7:30 this Saturday going to Duke. He's the guy's smart, so he can take him on. And in terms of the standings for the ACC on the Coastal side, I'm just pulling this up. Yeah, that doesn't help me, buddy. There you go. Let's see, 4-2. I mean, look, outside of Duke right now, who's 4-4 overall, 2-3 in the conference, and then Tech, who is just completely out of it. Every team in the Coastal, UNC's 4-5, 3-3 in the conference. But every other team, you got a 6-3 Virginia overall, 6-3 Pitt, 5-3 Vatech, 5-4 Florida, 4-4 Duke.
Florida.
I mean Miami. Mm-hmm. Sorry. My point is this: as much as everybody dogs us, yes, they're cannibalizing themselves a little over there. It's a little bit of a mess. At the end of the season, these teams could be all bowling. I mean, the ACC, as I'm looking at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 with the potential of 11, depending on how you guys do, and
I'd knock
and
us out.
UNC and Duke, how they finish out, could out of all the teams could be bowling. So, and then you see what happens against other teams in the bowl season. So I know we get dogged, but we talked about it a long time ago. You know, we may have a lot of these teams end up cannibalizing themselves, but they'll find a way to make a bowl game, winning the games outside of their conference, and then they get to the bowl season, and surprisingly, the ACC pulls off wins and ends up looking much better. It isn't talked about a whole ton, but for us that reside within the conference or our teams, it ends up looking a little better. We're still not very good, which is why Clemson can't lose, but just something to be said for that.
Yep.
Okay.
So now let's get into the last 3 games that definitely have direct playoff implications. We talked about the next 2 teams that we're going to talk about, or the next 2 games that involve teams last week. The first is, and this is both out west, Utah taking on Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Utah, 1-loss team, had one stumble on the year, but has played pretty good football. Kyle Whittingham's got them moving. Their defense, they went and played a Washington team that kind of came out early and gave them a little bit of a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob Eason coming off a really strong game against Oregon in the loss. What happened?
You said it, man. I mean, Washington came out and they hit him in the mouth. It was, I believe it was 14-0 before the blink of an eye, really. Jacob Eason throughout the game, 29 for 52, 316 yards, 4 TDs, 2 picks. Now, mind you, he was on. I don't think those 2 picks came till the second half. So he was, he was getting it done. On the ground, not so much. I mean, this is. They were able to get it done through the air. The number 1, the receiver Hunter Bryant for Washington, went 6 for $105 and 2 TDs. And Utah was stumbling, man. They were just stumbling. But Utah's identity, like their tough-minded coach Whittingham, is defense and smash you in the mouth, and that's what it was from the beginning of the year. And that's where it turned it on, because Washington couldn't run the ball on them. Utah's defense took over in terms of shutting down the run, and eventually they figured out the passing game, got a couple picks. One of them, I believe, that was a pick 6 on Jacob Eason. Zach Moss, the running back, having a really good year. I think just very underrated, not talked about. I don't think he's a speed demon, but he will hit you.
He's a punisher.
27 carries, man. He got work. 100 yards and a TD. The quarterback, Tyler Hunley, had a great game. 19 of 24, not a lot, but very efficient. 284 and a TD, but also had 7 carries. Only 6 yards, but one of those was TD. And they did their thing. They did what they do. Nothing outlandish from a receiving perspective in terms of numbers, other than the fact that number 25 for Utah, Jalen Dixon, had 2 receptions for 72 yards. So there were 2 big ones. He had big ones. Number 19, Brian Thompson, had 2 for 60. So a couple big ones. But that was the big ones. Zach Moss also had 5 receptions for 41 yards and a TD. So overall, he had 141 all-purpose yards and 2 TDs. And that is Utah's identity. So what happened was Washington, coming off of a pace game, a high-paced game with an Oregon team, continued that trend and ran into a defensive run-the-ball, smash-you-in-the-mouth type team like this in Utah, and it started out well, but it wasn't sustainable. And at the end of the day, that defense for Utah looked every bit as good as what people talked about at the beginning of the year, talking about them being a potential playoff contender or dark horse, whatever you want to say. And that what we saw, 33-28 final. It wasn't a gimme, but that's a pretty good Washington team. Great coaching, Chris Peterson over there, but what we saw was, I think, what everybody was expecting a lot more of at the beginning of the year, and they've done it really week in and week out, but because it's not high-paced and high-powered and flashy, because it's defensive-minded and then offensively run the ball and hit you in the mouth, you're not going to get tons of accolades like wow or highlights like wow, but still under the radar, still sitting there, just all ready to creep right in. They have, they've been through the toughest part of their schedule.
Yep.
They have UCLA, who's been doing better.
Yep.
But still, UCLA is like Washington, maybe even a little less able to compete. But they're high powered. That's what they do. The Chip Kelly. They're going to run into a buzzsaw. Then Utah goes to Arizona. Then they have Colorado at home. So they need to win out. And they have everything in front of them. And the easy part of their schedule is there to win out to get to that Pac-12 championship. But again, end of the day, you ask me what happened. They bowed up is what happened. Yeah. And Washington tried, and eventually they ran into a brick wall.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem, too, is if you look, Washington was far more committed to the running game against Oregon than they were in this game. And I think that was a mistake. And then you keep going to the air, and then you started having the turnovers. And the reality is you want to kind of play a little bit to Utah's game, because if you're not getting the running game going and you abandon it, you make yourself one-dimensional. This score was, 21-18 after the end of the third quarter. Washington had the lead.
It was at halftime, it was 14-13 Washington. And then it was 21-13 Washington in the third quarter.
Okay, so
and then Utah scored a couple field goals, I think. I don't think they missed an extra point, did they?
But the point is, you're playing with the lead, so you want to – I understand that they have a more prolific passing attack than Utah does traditionally, but that's what got you into trouble. Like, run the ball. Make this team play, and they abandoned that, and Utah punished them for it.
Yeah, I mean, here's your stat. Eason threw the ball 52 times. The entire team ran the ball 18 times. You're not going to get it done against a team that you got to.
Ahmed ran the ball 24 times against Oregon alone.
Yeah, God, you got to try to adapt to that. I mean, this is when you're not the favored team, then that's when you need to play to your competition. Okay, right. You got to try to play up and try to match them. And Eason didn't get it done.
Is he a senior this year? Or is he a redshirt junior? I can't remember what year he transferred in.
I can't remember, but either way, he's going to go into the draft. And honestly, I wasn't very high on him. I've talked about it a lot this year. Not the student of the game, but he's resurrected his career, his potential, especially his draft stock at Washington. So I give him credit for that. But he'll be going after this year.
All right, so we're going to move on. So Utah maintains their position as a one-loss team, looking for a playoff showdown. Likely with our next team, Oregon, traveling to USC, take on the Trojans. Also a one-loss team. Their one loss coming in the first week of the season against the Auburn team we talked about before.
Best one-loss team in the country right there.
Yeah, they are playing well. I think unlike the Big 12, they are a legitimate one-loss team looking at a playoff shot, especially if these two teams go down the pipe with one loss. Oregon, this was a game where Oregon, who has been running the ball very, very well lately, didn't have quite the running game they've had in the past, and it was the Justin Herbert show.
It was, don't get it twisted. The one loss Utah has was to USC in the Coliseum. So, USC has something going. They still have a shot at their side of the conference. Considering they have the head-to-head with Utah, if Utah were to take a couple losses, they go into this game 5-3. C.J. Verdell, where were you, man? You've been killing all year. Now, to his credit, Travis Dye with the wrist-hand injury did come back. I think he had a wrist-hand injury, or maybe that was his brother on the defensive side of the ball. He went 12 for 75 on the ground, no TDs. But the running game wasn't really super effective. After the first quarter, it was 10-0 USC.
Yep.
And then number 10 came to play. And in the second quarter, Oregon drops 28 points to USC 7. Goes into half 28-17. It was over. Justin Herbert goes 21-26, 225 yards, 3 TDs and a pick. Let me tell you something. He was dropping bombs, throwing lasers, seeds, everything that you have heard about the kid that could potentially be the number one quarterback drafted, he showed in this game.
Yeah, he had two impressive passes that were two totally different. One, he threw an absolute just laser in a perfect spot to his receiver on the goal line on a go route, on a short go route, and then turned around on his next touchdown pass and threw a back shoulder to his receiver right on the side, and it was just awesome. So it's showing versatility in the way he can throw the ball. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, a scary moment. He did take a hit to the legs by a defender from USC. And
it was a low hit.
Yeah, it was a low hit on the knees. His knee was buckled when it happened. Now, fortunately, if you look at it, his feet weren't planted in the ground. It's almost like he kind of cut his feet loose when he saw that coming.
Yeah, and so he got both legs wrapped.
Yeah, so the legs just kind of were up in the air rather than stable, so it didn't bend him backwards. Went out for a play, came right back in, and continued to do his thing. I'm a huge Justin Herbert fan. If you don't already know, I'm a huge Cristobal fan. The defense performed well in this game. They stepped up. I am a little it is a good defense, and I do think they are very competent to be in the running, even if they get to the Pac-12 championship with Utah unscathed and they come out the winners, they definitely deserve to be there. But there are past few games with Washington and then with USC, there's a little question mark in my mind on the defense. They're fast, but there's been last two games I haven't seen
they're not dominant
pass rush
they're not
from guys like Thibodeau that I expect to see. It's not dominant, and that could cause them trouble. Don't worry about that right now, Ducks. Just do what you got to do. Get yourself to that Pac-12 championship, and then figure it out from there. Because from here, they've got Arizona at home, which is easy. They got to go to Arizona State. Yep. It's not a gimme, but they should handle their business there. And then they have the Civil War with Oregon State, who's actually much better this year than they have been in year past, but that's not competition for Oregon.
Yep.
So, but the defense was a little question mark the past couple weeks. Regardless, this is setting up to be maybe the biggest conference championship game in college football this year, even more than the SEC, just depending on what shakes out. But it could be a real fun one if Oregon and Utah win this thing out and play for the Pac-12 championship.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll move on to the last game. This one has some serious implications. It's the world's largest cocktail party. Yes, it still is. I don't care about all you PCers. UGA and UF getting it on in Duval County down in Jacksonville. A lot of people leaning UF in this game. UF, playing some tough games so far. Obviously, there were one blemish that they had against LSU, but they played them really tough to the end. UGA, rough loss to South Carolina. Fromm probably had one of his worst games I've ever seen him play in this. UGA got a lot of questions in the passing offense and some questions in the passing defense.
Oh, yeah.
So, again, this was I think everybody was kind of leaning UF on this one just with the eye test. And, man, this is why they play them.
This is why they play them. And, we're in Atlanta. And obviously tons of dog fans around here. They're always so uber confident. I wasn't so much because of what you just said. In terms of Georgia's receiving core, not that they're not elite. A lot of them are young. They're all new there. So, there's definitely something to be said between the quarterback wide receiver relationship. The symbiotic feel of when a guy's going to come out of a break and when to release it at the right time. Very big question. And going into this game, I didn't think that Georgia could match Florida with that speed offensively, especially from the passing game. And if they got down, they'd be in big trouble. Yeah, they can.
And Florida
run
got a lot of guys back
yeah,
for
and
this.
Florida they had a bye week, so Zuniga came back, and they, that
Tony back on offense.
Fast defense for Florida, and Georgia still a great defense, not the fast defense, just more of the big boys, tons of athletes. Will hit you hard, but haven't really shown anything spectacular. I thought going into this game, the only way Georgia would have a chance is, one, be able to do their thing on the ground, two, be able to do their thing defensively. All right, let me go backwards. Three, be able to do their thing defensively. Two, be able to do their thing on the ground. But number one is have those receivers. I don't think they could outspeed Florida's D, but body them up enough.
Yep. There's some size in their receiving core.
I mean, Cager's a big boy. And
so
be able to
Blaylock.
body him up enough to make some plays and to have Fromm just be on point, with back shoulder throws, because that's the type of thing that you could do, bodying him up, just throwing him where where it's going to be tight coverage, and he's just got to put it in place where his man can be the only one to possibly have a shot at the ball, otherwise no one gets it. I didn't know how they were going to do it. Did I think they were out of it? No. Florida goes into this game, 6?
Yep.
And Georgia was 8.
Yep.
Okay. So not that I put Georgia out of it. I just, and especially the line on this game was Georgia giving Florida 6.5.
Yep.
That was just a shocker to me, but golly, Vegas is scary.
Yeah.
24-17 is the final. So 6.5 and it's 7 and Georgia covers. Jake Fromm got back on. Let me stop. Congratulations, Bulldogs.
Yep.
By all means, did you deserve this? I'm not a huge Bulldog fan, and the Bulldog fans are obnoxious and annoy me, but I love Mr. Fromm. I love Jake Fromm. Great character guy, great student of the game. I think you can make a lot of waves in the NFL. Okay, he won't be as high a draft pick as you think. I don't even know if he'll go in the first, but somebody's going to be lucky to have him.
Yep.
Maybe a guy that could sit behind a good veteran that's aging, which there's a lot of them. Jake Fromm, I love. And Georgia, you have now put yourself right back into the college football playoff running. You are right back in it.
Yep.
You have got a lot in front of you. You got to take on a very good Auburn team.
Play an A&M team that's not a slouch.
No, and then you got to go to the championship game. But this game, this win, this late in the year,
it's huge.
I think you better watch out for Georgia.
Yeah.
And because what's left in the West with the big one this weekend between LSU and Bama still has Auburn, the Iron Bowl at the end of the year, and these teams still got to kind of get up and get down and beat the crap out of each other. And Georgia, they do have Missouri after Auburn, so that's not a gimme, okay? Or no, I'm sorry, they have Missouri this week. Then they have Auburn. Then they have A&M and Tech. But let me tell you something. They could walk in pretty fresh in that SEC championship, clicking on all the right cylinders. And let me bring this point up to you, Mr. Villauer. Sans last year, every team prior that has won the national championship has had one loss. And when they've had that one loss, it seemed to propel them to the next level. And that's what I'm, eerily, I see that in Georgia. I eerily, because, they ran the ball. There was this, they were talking about it all game. The team in this game that ran the ball better and controlled the time of possession was the team to win the game. And they did that. And that's what they're known for. But their defense stepped up, man. Their defense looked very good. If you were to tell me before this game, which defense do you think is better right now? I would have said Florida, absolutely. Beginning of the year, maybe not, but they've proven themselves.
Well,
Today, Georgia's defense showed up like everyone expected, or not today, this weekend, and my hat's off to Kirby Smart. Good for him and the Bulldogs. You guys have everything in front of you. When you lost to South Carolina, that's a shitty loss. That sucks. But he said we still have everything in front of us, and he motivated his kids the right way to put it behind them and focus on what's ahead.
Yeah, let me say this. If you told me after week 3 or 4 that it was going to be Georgia playing Jake Fromm and the Gators playing Trask at quarterback, I'd tell you that Georgia's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And this is probably about 3 or 4 weeks in.
Mm-hmm.
The struggle that we saw was their inability to really pass the ball, and it really reared its ugly head. In a game, in reality, they should have still been able to win against South Carolina, as bad as Fromm played. Here was kind of the thing I will tell you. I said this against LSU for Florida. I said you needed to run the ball against LSU 140-plus yards, and you needed to win the turnover battle +2. Florida ran for over 140 yards, but didn't win the turnover battle. Okay, in this game, I would just tell you, with the way the teams were going into it, you just needed to run the ball for over 140 yards in the game, and you beat Georgia. This is a game where the Gators shut down a pretty prolific running game in the sense that they weren't able to get huge chunk plays in this game. DeAndre Swift, one of the best running backs in college football, one of the top 5 certainly, ran 25 times for 86 yards. What really was the difference in this game to me was they were able to put the ball and make this a Jake Fromm versus Trask meet, and Fromm's going to win that. I'm just sorry, he's going to win it. But what Florida did that killed them was not committing to the run. They had 12 rushes outside of their quarterback.
DeAndre Swift had more rushes on his own
than the whole team, including the 6 calls for Trask, which are probably more running for your life than anything else.
Yeah, those is a negative 22 yards, so those were probably sacroiliacs.
Yeah, so you're talking about you that really to me was where this game was won or lost. Is Florida allowed it to be a Trask versus Fromm battle, and that was a mistake. I'll give you an example. You get Tony back, who looked fresh when I saw him out there running. He only had the one run, and it was he had to literally push his tight end down because he was getting in his way and got tackled for no gain. And they didn't find him in the passing game at all, not once. This is probably their most athletic player on offense. I'm not saying he's the best, but he's their most athletic player on offense, and they couldn't get him the ball. And they made that mistake of allowing it to become a Trask versus Fromm. And I'm going to tell you, you can crap on Fromm for that bad game all you want. You're going to lose that battle 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10.
It's hard to win in college football. Nobody's perfect. This kid he's still just a 21-year-old kid. For Florida, their 2 big receivers since Tony's been out has been tight end Kyle Pitts, and he had a good game, 4 catches for 78 yards, but Van Jefferson, he scored 2, but only had 2 catches for 31. Freddie Swain went 8 for 91 in TD, so he was their highlight, but he's not been their head guy in terms of receptions. Here's the bottom line. Florida had 33 passes and 12 rushes. Totally unbalanced. And if we go by the statisticals that the team that rushes the ball best in this game wins, that's not going to make it happen. Whereas Georgia, 37 rushes and 30 passes, totally balanced, yet lean towards that statistical that they knew could get them the win.
You're talking about a 12-minute differential in time of possession, and more importantly, talk about helmet stickers. Georgia's offensive line, 0 sacks on Fromm. Worst thing you can do is let that kid sit back there and throw. His statistics are very close to Trask, but he will find guys if you're not getting to him. You cannot let a kid that's not really a runner get comfortable like that, especially a kid that's got 3 years of some hardcore college football experience.
Yeah, he's been there up against the best in very adverse situations, and the only time I really saw a bad one, him get hit, a guy was coming in on his legs, and it was almost off his back foot, and he floated a beautiful ball out to the outside to like one of his tight ends. Just perfect. And, if you were to tell me before the game, and I think there was even some chatter about it, who's going to, from a coaching perspective, Smart versus Mullen, who's going to out-coach or out-strategize or out-game the other? I mean, I think Kirby is a solid, hard-nosed coach, great motivator, great guy, a coach you want. But Mullen is a little bit of that mad scientist, and he's good at adjustments. He's good at play calling, and
this guy was the offensive coordinator for 2 championships for Florida.
I wouldn't have seen it, but let me tell you something. It didn't matter whatever he even tried to do or didn't try to do because Georgia just beat him up. And again, you have Georgia. Congratulations. This is a huge win. Not just the fact that for you to get where you need to go and everything's in front of you still, and that you still have a shot, but for what it does for you at your team, your players, your fans, the whole program, that people kind of wrote them off after South Carolina. You said it going into this game. There was a lot more hubbub about Florida, even though Vegas knew something. Vegas. And Georgia showed why it still owns the SEC East, and even more so, this could propel them. It wouldn't surprise me if they get to the national title game because of something like this.
Now, while we say that, I agree with you. This is a big statement win, a kind that kind of gets you in another gear. Florida's not out of it from an SEC East perspective because, again, Georgia's got a couple of tough games ahead. If Georgia, was to stumble against Auburn and Texas A&M and Florida wins out, they would get a shot at this championship or shot at the title game for the SEC. But right now, the road definitely leads through Athens for the SEC East, and a one-loss UGA team puts the SEC West on notice. That it isn't, Alabama, LSU win that game and you're in. It could be tough. So it'll be a very, very, very interesting play as we go down. UGA is still clearly in the hunt for a playoff bid this year.
Yep. So let's run through conference by conference what we're looking at.
Friend. We already kind of hit the ACC because really it's Clemson. Clemson beats Wake, and it's a guarantee that they're in, and all likelihood is that that'll happen. We said it was wide open. I tell you, there's 5 teams legitimately playing for that Coastal and Virginia Tech, UVA, and Pitt. Virginia Tech having the best overall record. All those 3 teams I just mentioned are 2-loss ACC teams in conference. And then you got Miami and UNC on the outside looking in. So there's your ACC. Big 12 we kind of touched upon right now. It really looks like Oklahoma, Baylor. Texas is hoping Baylor gets, they got 3 tough games at the end of the year, including one against Texas. If Baylor takes 2 losses, they could sneak in.
Texas right now is 5-3 overall, 3-2 in the conference. Kansas State is 6-2 overall, 3-2 in the conference.
Yep. So
Iowa State is 5-3 overall, 3-2 in the conference.
Yep. So there's some other players.
Now you got Iowa State, Kansas State, and Texas, hoping there's some sort of slip-up, multiple slip-ups between Baylor and Oklahoma to possibly slip into the championship game.
Yep. Moving on to the Big Ten, really what you've got is you've got a Penn State, Ohio State front runners and Minnesota, Wisconsin in the, East and West now? Or it's East and West, right, for the Big Ten?
Yes.
Minnesota, with a win at Penn State, I think would lock up likely even though they've got a game against Wisconsin because Wisconsin's got 2 losses in conference. But if Minnesota was to trip up against Penn State and then lose to Wisconsin would get in for the West. And again, that Penn State-Ohio State game, really is going to come down to is really going to be it, because even if Penn State loses to Minnesota but beats Ohio State, they would have the head-to-head against Ohio State and take the East. So, that's how that one plays out. We've already touched on the Pac-12. Oregon and Utah are clear front runners. They got to just take care of business. Oregon probably has a little bit tougher road, and that they do have Arizona State. They both play Arizona.
Right now in the Pac-12 North, the next closest team to Oregon is actually their rival, Oregon State.
Yep.
They're 4-4 overall, 3-2 in the conference. So,
But
Oregon would have to lose either to Arizona or Arizona State and then lose to Oregon State in the Civil War. I don't think that'll happen, but crazier things have happened. And in the Pac-12 South, you got USC at 5-4 overall, but only 4-2 in the conference, and they do have the head-to-head win over Utah, who's in front of them. So
Utah would have to stumble.
Utah would have to stumble, and who did I say? They have Colorado, Arizona, and UCLA. So, and surprisingly, UCLA is 4-2 in the conference. So they too could potentially work their way into this thing. We'll have to see. But yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I think everyone wants to see that Pac-12 championship we were speaking on earlier between Oregon and Utah.
Yeah, and then in the SEC, you're really looking at LSU, Alabama, because the winner of that game is, I mean, I guess if Alabama beats LSU, Auburn's still got 2 conference losses. Really not likely that anybody else will get in besides those 2 teams. And we just discussed the UGA UF. I mean, UGA controls their road, though their road is tough. So Florida could sneak back in. But right now it looks like a Georgia going up against the LSU-Alabama winner this week.
And we will get into that into this week's preview. We won't miss the preview this week. Sorry, we did last week. But there was a lot of big teams on by, so it's not the worst thing. And the only big game was the cocktail party. So, but this week this is the clash that everybody's been waiting for all year now between LSU and Alabama. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, meanwhile, it's maybe slightly lesser game just given the rankings, but still huge is Penn State and Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be played in Minnesota. So those are some interesting ones as this playoff picture begins to take shape. But again, we talk about the expectations. The last 2-3 weeks, chaos has ensued.
It has.
So there could be more in store for us as we go.
Yep. So that's going to wrap up the recap. However, we have some fun headlines to hit on.
For some.
Yeah, we're all right. We're just about an hour, and these are usually longer, so let's take a little time to talk about my partner in crime's alma mater, the Florida State Seminoles. How you feeling? Willie Taggart, head coach of the Seminoles, was fired. Big buyout, but you have said it over this cast that your understanding was they had collected enough money to buy this guy out.
Yep.
Well, they did, and now he's gone. Who's the interim?
Interim is Odell Higgins. He is an alumnus from Florida State. He's longest tenured coach with the team. He's been with the team 26 years. He's our D-line and particularly interior D-line coach. You may remember his name. He took over for the bowl game when Fisher took off and headed to A&M, and they were looking for a coach and got Willie Taggart. They let Odell be the head coach. Let me just say about Odell. This guy is awesome. Love him. Next coaching staff, you don't sign him, I'm not going to like you right off the bat. Think about some of the defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen that we've put in the NFL over the last 20 years. I mean, you've got guys like Corey Simon,
Brian Burns.
He coaches. He doesn't coach the ends quite as much, but is also a monster recruiter. He is responsible for many of the big-time recruits we brought in, and I'm not talking about D-line. I'm talking about all over the ball. Everybody loves him. So he's going to take over, which I like, because I don't think their next coach is on staff right now.
No, we'll talk about that. Let's talk about more about the feelings of the firing, and not just the firing in and of itself, but the timing of the firing.
Okay, let me. I'm gonna peel all the layers.
You get a lot of good stuff because you got a guy that is, he bleeds garnet and gold.
Yep. Yeah. I'm gonna
whether it's been good or bad.
I'm gonna peel back the onion on this one and go back to the beginning of this, and we're not gonna get into this blame Jimbo era.
And before you do, keep in mind 2 weeks ago you guys played who? Wake.
Yes.
Okay, that was the loss of Wake, but or maybe it was that game or before, but after that game, one of the losses, you said to me, I really have no feelings. I don't feel.
It was Wake.
I don't feel any type of way. And you're not happy, sad, angry.
A Florida State loss generally would, at a minimum, would give me 3 to 4 hours of just anger where I just have to kind of pace and be by myself.
Yes. You would be irked, but you weren't after that, and it seemed like you had relegated yourself to the fact that this is who you were. Oh, well, ho-hum. And I said to you, we are big college football guys. We're big football guys in general, but especially college football and for our teams. And hitting that level of emotion for your team where it's just pretty much non-existent and don't give a crap, that's a scary proposition, especially when you're talking about a program like Florida State.
Yeah. Now
go.
So it's kind of peeling back the onion a little bit. Let me just say this. It would have taken an elite leader, forget coach, an elite leader to turn around where the program was when Fisher left. If we're going to blame anybody, we need to blame the administration. From losing and this will go back to losing our AD to Penn State. I think that was 4 years ago. We lost our AD to Penn State. And we went with an interim AD. Couldn't see eye to eye with Fisher. Fisher's a tough coach to deal with. I'm not going to deny it. He's a good coach, but he's a tough coach to deal with. He used to say, I would, someone asked, would you ever go coach with Nick Saban again? He said, no, I did my time already, talking about how difficult Saban is. Fisher ain't much different, okay? And you can say what you want about how he left the program, and yeah, he left us in a bad position. He's definitely, he played a role in that. Let me say that. He is not fully responsible, but he played a role in it. But when we lost that AD, things really started to tumble. And there's all this talk, and there was an article written by, I think his name was Matt Hayes, about how we were left and where this all went wrong. And there was talk about how his handling of Jameis Winston created this chaos. And I think, again, that's a point. Everything's relative to something else. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So you've got all this going on. And here's what Florida State did. I think that was the biggest mistake. Jimbo Fisher, and I'm not faulting him for this, flirted with leaving 3 years in a row. Okay? And every time he got a raise and every time he fought for his assistants to get a raise, and the university just kept bowing to him. Okay. And honestly, after I was ready for him to leave, I wanted him to leave when he left. I honestly, a part of me wanted him to leave the year before to go to LSU, because it was always the LSU. The first 2 years of his flirting was LSU. It was whether Les Miles would go or not go, and then would he go there? And every year, Florida State came up with more money. So we pandered to this kind of mentality with a team that was really starting to sink already. And you look at the players, and I remember telling you, I've used this example multiple times. When I was ready to see Fisher leave, happened in the UF game. Matthew Thomas, a 5-star recruit, almost tried to bail on us after he committed. He tried to sneak out of it and go to USC at the end, and it was just an ugly thing. This is a guy that came in, got injured. So in the game against UF, he goes and intercepts the ball, or it was either an interception or a fumble. It was around the 20-yard line of UF. We win this game, but he runs the ball in and decides to do one of these showboat, put my hands out to the side, and he fumbles the ball on the 1-yard line. And thankfully, we got the ball back and ran it in on the next score and was able to put the game away. And he was laughing on the sidelines. And not one coach was in his face. And I saw the mentality of this team. All right, so now I'm gonna use that as a base. So now we fast forward a little bit, and I would tell you, I'm gonna post this. There's some I forget what they call it, after hours, and Kirk Herbstreit at about the 6-minute mark. So I'll flag that for you. Started at the 6-minute mark on the dot. Talks about his feelings of Florida State. Now I will say this about Kirk Herbstreit: he has rallied for Florida State many times. He's been a believer in them over the years. For all the people want to say, and he trashes us. And I hate to say it, but he was 100% right. I'll let you watch it and listen to what he has to say. So now you bring in Willie Taggart in this impossible situation. Again, it would have taken an elite person. Willie Taggart should have been fired. He should have, okay? And not fired because he's a horrible coach. I hope he gets another opportunity. This is a guy that was a Florida State fan, wanted to return us. I remember using the words like, we need to bring back the war daddies of the Bowden era. And he's right. Like, he was right in what his idea was. Here is the problem that's happened with him. He was strapped with an APR issue, which we didn't really find out about as Florida State alumni until the end of the year, after that first year, where he kept playing guys and he kept saying, I'm going to hold people accountable. I'm going to hold people accountable. And yet I would see these upperclassmen continue to play who wanted to do nothing but run their mouth. They got lazy. I watched the team quit against Clemson last year and did all this garbage. Well, here's the thing that I got to say, and I'm going to say about Willie Taggart getting fired. There's a few things you can control as a head coach right off the bat, right, in college football. One of the challenges, you can't control your talent because you got to recruit. You got to have a chance. And he didn't get a fair chance to recruit. His first recruiting year, he was brought in. I think it was the first or second year of the early signing period. He was brought in. The early signing period hit. We had nothing. And he salvaged a class that was in the 60s and brought us in, I think, a number 13 class in the country. So I give him credit for that. But here's the thing. You got to develop your team, all right? I'll bring up some examples. And we went to the Clemson game, okay? And we were sitting there, and there was a Florida State fan that was that was friends with one of our friends who was there, and I hadn't met him before. We came out of a turnover on downs, and we came out of I believe it was the turnover on the interception, and we had to call a timeout before the beginning of a series. You can control your game management as a head coach. Here's the other thing. Penalties. Pre-snap penalties. We have been horrific in controlling that. We consistently put ourselves in 1st and 15 with pre-snap penalties. You can create a level of discipline on this team. Those are things you can do in year one. And Taggart has failed to make that change. Okay, I can deal with getting beat and no talent. The other problem I saw was young players deserve chewings every now and then. They deserve to get their ass chewed. And I never saw him lose his temper. And I go back to Dabo. Dabo in that game against Florida State, they were whipping us. And he chewed his kicker. Now, he's not a chewing all the time kind of guy, but he knows how to place that kind of discussion to make a point. And he did. And he got there. Before this last game, he challenged Etienne, who's one of the best running backs in football, and called him out and said, you need to be better. I never saw that out of Willie Taggart. At some point, you have to change the narrative of he spent 4 to 5 weeks telling us we're really close to playing winning football. Eventually, you got to do it. And Willie couldn't do it. Now, here we are now in this position. Now, this is a thing I will tell you. If Florida State does not make the right hire here, they will become like a Notre Dame after 1988. Notre Dame was pretty irrelevant for a decade and a half, and really, I'd still say from a playoff perspective, are still pretty irrelevant. The 2 good years they put together, they got absolutely beat up in a title game and in a playoff game. They're not elite. And the Florida State that we know, and Florida State's not a real true blue blood in the sense that they don't have years and years of history, but given their dominance in the late 80s, 90s, and even into the early parts of 2000, they became a blue blood. Mm-hmm. They did. They no longer are. And here's the thing is, I'm gonna throw out all this craziness with the coaching staff. I just saw Lane Kiffin. I've heard Urban Meyer. I'm hearing Bob Stoops. I think Jesus was on the record there to play.
I'm gonna run down some names for you. I just saw the Kiffin thing too. We talked about the mad scientist Michael Leach, which I think is tremendous, which came up. But 10 names I'm gonna rattle from 10 to 1 that have been up for potential.
Sure.
Urban Meyer. Number 9, James Franklin. I don't think he'd leave Penn State.
I want James Franklin drug tested if he signs that contract.
Number 8, Bob Stoops. Number 7, Dave Clawson.
Yep. Heard
from
that
Wake Forest.
Yep.
Really good coach. Number 6, Matt Campbell.
Yep.
Good coach at Iowa State. Said he's not leaving, but if you pay somebody enough, that can change. Number 5 and number 4. The Clemson co-offensive coordinators in tandem, Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott.
I'd say Jeff Scott would be a more likely. He's got some ties to FSU.
Well, and Jeff Scott is is the guy that, our recruiting is a lot due to Jeff Scott.
Yep.
Okay, all the great recruiting classes we've had, especially in that quarterback and wide receiver, the skill positions, that's Jeff Scott. Number 3, Mike Norvell from Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, Mike Stoops from Kentucky.
Mark Stoops.
Mark Stoops. And number 1, PJ Fleck, rowing the boat from cold-ass Minnesota down to warm-ass Tallahassee.
All right.
And then Brent Venables from Clemson also is in the mix.
These are names
I don't know
thrown out
Clemson,
there.
We pay our guys a lot, and I don't know that we're going to give one of our guys to not just somebody in the conference, but in the same division. I don't see that happening. I don't see Dabo allowing that to happen. But you never know. You never know.
Well, let me say it this way. I have to state the painful truth. And we learned this lesson through Jimbo Fisher. We are not an elite coaching gig. We're not. We're a potentially elite school, but we're not an elite coaching gig. We were spoiled by Bobby Bowden's dedication to the university and all that he did for us. We don't have the deep pockets of some of these other universities. We cannot afford a $7, $8, $9, $10 million a year coach. So of your names there, you can wipe some of those names off for that. The other part of this is it's the administration. You got to get this right. And something we heard, and I'm a believer in this, Mike Leach would be a really interesting
awesome.
prospect.
I'd love to have him in the ACC. It would cause problems. But.
Yeah, but here's what they said about it is, Leach is the kind of guy that is going to speak his mind. And they said he doesn't interview particularly well because he'll say exactly what's on his mind, and it's not always friendly to, to those teams. So here's the thing I'll say is you better be willing, Florida State administration, to take on the truth and to take your medicine. If you don't, it could spell the end of FSU's relevancy for a long, long time. I don't want them to run out and hire. They need to just shut up. Don't talk about.
So are
who
they
you're
going to hire a firm? You think this go around? Because typically they do it from within.
No.
A lot of people are saying it might benefit them to hire a firm.
Well, I'm not saying will or it won't. I don't think they will. I think this is what you do. You keep your mouth shut. Let the Lane Kiffins come out and say, I'm interested. I don't care. Bring up every name under the sun. But you sit down and you think about this. You got about 2 weeks before you got to pull the trigger because you need a coach set up for the final 30 days before the early signing period. Because understand, your whole recruiting class could get flipped upside down if it doesn't fit the team that you're about to, or the coaching style you're about to put on the field. And make a decision with the understanding that it's not about the money. It's not, pay what you have to pay, do what you have to do, but realize that you have failed the university as an administration, and you better figure this out because the James Franklins, I'm sorry, I don't want to hear pipe dream garbage and crap. Realize that you have failed this university, and you failed Willie Taggart. In all honesty, I don't look at this as the guy that deserves to go. So, I don't know. You got to think long and hard about what it's going to be. If you allow yourself to play this one in the press, then you're an idiot, and you've doomed us to mediocrity for more than a decade. And that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't have a front runner for the coach. We're not going to heal this problem in 1 year, but we need somebody that's going to come in and be a dominant personality, and that I do know.
Yep. So there you have it. Mid-season or a little bit past 2/3 of the way through the season, 27-10 loss at home in Tallahassee to Miami. He gets fired. FSU is going to be paying roughly $17 million. Buy him out. He was just 9-12 in 21 games at FSU, and that's not going to cut it, folks. So the story is still to be written for Florida State. And honestly, I hope for your sake that you do make the right hire and you guys get back to where you need to be, because we need our conference to start to rise up again. I'm not ever expecting us to be the best, but we definitely need to be not the last. So that will be it for today's college football recap of Week 10. We appreciate everyone listening. We'll get it out and up as soon as we can and move on to the week. We'll see you as always on the gridiron. Have a good day.